4.1.1 Develop Project Charter, Inputs. 4.1.1.1 Business Documents. Business Case. Think of the business case as the game plan for building a top-tier drag car. Before you even turn a wrench, you gotta know why you're building it. Is it to win more races, cut costs, or satisfy a special request from a big sponsor? This game plan justifies why the build is worth the investment of time and money. Examples: market demand, like building a more fuel-efficient drag-and-drive dragster because racers are demanding better mileage. Organizational need, combining staff roles in the shop to streamline operations and cut overhead. Customer request, a sponsor asking for a new substation to handle a more powerful engine setup. Technological advance, switching to electronic tuning systems instead of old-school manual adjustments. Legal requirement, making sure your build meets new safety standards. Ecological impact, building greener engines to reduce emissions. Social need, maybe it's helping out a local community with a project that boosts your race shop's image. The project charter pulls all the key points from this game plan, setting the stage for everything you're gonna do. 4.1.1.2 Agreements. Agreements, these are like the contracts you sign when taking on a big build. Whether it's a detailed contract with a customer, a handshake deal, or an email outlining expectations, these agreements set the initial terms for the project. Examples: contracts, when a client wants a custom drag car built to their specs. MOUs/SLAs, agreements with parts suppliers to ensure you get the best components. Letters of intent, a potential sponsor showing interest in your next big project. 4.1.1.3 Enterprise Environmental Factors. Enterprise environmental factors, these are the outside factors that can influence your project. It's like the racing rules, market conditions, shop culture, and customer expectations that shape how you approach a build. Examples: government or industry standards, meeting safety and quality standards for race cars. Legal and regulatory requirements, ensuring your build complies with all regulations. Marketplace conditions, adapting to what's hot in the racing world. Organizational culture, the vibe and rules in your shop. Stakeholders' expectations, what your clients and sponsors expect from the build. 4.1.1.4 Organizational Process Assets. Organizational process assets, these are the tools and knowledge from past projects that you can use to guide your current build. It's like having a treasure trove of templates, past project records, and shop processes that help you stay on track. Examples: standard policies, processes, and procedures, your shop's best practices. Governance framework, the rules and decision-making processes that keep your projects running smoothly. Monitoring and reporting methods, how you keep track of progress and communicate with stakeholders. Templates, pre-made forms and checklists for your project. Historical information and lessons learned, knowledge from past builds that help you avoid mistakes and streamline the process. By pulling together all these inputs are just like gathering all the specs, tools, and parts for a custom builder, you set a solid foundation for your project with the project charter. This way, you know exactly what you're building, why you're building it, and how you're gonna get it done. That's how you take a project from concept to a beast ready to tear up the track. 13.1.1 Identify stakeholders, inputs. 13.1.1.1 Project Charter. Project Charter, think of the project charter as the game plan for your new street racing build. It lays out the key players, the crew, the sponsors, the parts suppliers. It might also detail what each person's responsibilities are, like who's tuning the engine and who's handling the nitrous setup. 13.1.1.2 Business Documents. Business documents, these are like the blueprints and strategy for your build, giving you insight into who's involved and what their stakes are. Business case, this is your reason for the build, whether it's to win races or showcase new tech. It identifies initial stakeholders, like the driver, the crew chief, and key sponsors. Benefits management plan, this plan lays out how you're gonna benefit from the build, whether it's more wins, better performance, or attracting more sponsors. It also highlights who will benefit, like the team, sponsors, and fans. 13.1.1.3 Project Management Plan. Project Management Plan, early on, you might not have this fully set up, but once it's ready, it's your detailed roadmap for the project. Communications Management Plan, just like keeping the crew in the loop with regular updates, this plan helps you manage who needs to know what and when. Stakeholder engagement plan. This is your strategy for keeping everyone involved and motivated, from the pit crew to the sponsors. 13.1.1.4 Project documents. Project documents. As you progress, more documents come into play, helping you keep track of who's involved and how they're affected. Change log. If you decide to swap out the engine or add a new sponsor, the change log helps track these shifts and who they impact. Issue log. When problems pop up, like a blown tire or a part not fitting right, the issue log helps manage who needs to be involved in the fix. Requirements documentation. This outlines what you need to get the car race ready, helping identify additional stakeholders like parts suppliers or additional crew members. 13.1.1.5 Agreements. Agreements. These are your contracts and deals, like the agreements with parts suppliers or sponsorships. They define who's involved and outline any additional stakeholders. 13.1.1.6 Enterprise environmental factors. Enterprise environmental factors. These are the external factors that can influence your project, like the racing rules, industry standards, and even the local street racing scene. Organizational culture and political climate. Just like the vibe in your shop, these factors influence how you operate. Government or industry standards. Making sure your build meets all the necessary regulations and standards. Market trends. Keeping an eye on what's hot in the racing world, so your build stays competitive. 13.1.1.7 Organizational process assets. Organizational process assets. These are the tools and templates you've got from past projects, helping you stay on track. Stakeholder register templates, pre-made lists and instructions for tracking stakeholders. Historical information and lessons learned, knowledge from previous builds that help avoid past mistakes and streamline the current project. By identifying stakeholders early and keeping them engaged, you ensure everyone's on the same page, just like making sure your crew knows the plan before a big race. This way, you're ready to tackle any challenges and cross that finish line first. 4.2.1 Develop project management plan, inputs. 4.2.1.1 Project charter. Project charter. This is like your street racing build sheet. It gives you the basics of the project, to what you're building, why you're building it, and who's involved. Depending on how complex your race car project is, the charter might be simple or loaded with details. At a minimum, it lays out the high-level info that you'll expand on in your detailed plans. 4.2.1.2 Outputs from other processes. Outputs from other processes. When you're building a race car, you take inputs from different steps of the build process, like the chassis setup, engine tuning, and suspension work. All these individual outputs come together to form your complete race car. Similarly, the project management plan pulls in outputs from various planning processes to create a cohesive plan. Any changes in these documents might need updates to keep everything aligned. 4.2.1.3 Enterprise environmental factors. Enterprise environmental factors. These are the outside influences that can affect your build, like racing rules, safety standards, and the latest tech advancements. Government or industry standards. Think about the NHRA or EHA rules you gotta follow. Legal and regulatory requirements. Make sure you're not breaking any laws with your modifications. Project management body of knowledge. This is like knowing the best practices in your field, whether it's construction or environmental safety. Organizational structure, culture, management practices, how your race team is organized, their working style, and sustainability practices. Organizational governance framework, the policies and procedures your team follows to stay on track. Infrastructure, the tools, equipment, and facilities you've got to work with. 4.2.1.4 Organizational process assets. Organizational process assets. These are the internal tools and templates from your racing shop or company that help guide your project. Standard policies, processes, and procedures, like the rules in your shop for building a race car. Project management plan template, a template to guide your planning, including tailoring guidelines, how to customize standard processes for your specific build. Project closure guidelines, steps for wrapping up the project, like final tests and approvals. Change control procedures, how to handle changes in your build plan, like if you decide to swap out parts or make design changes, and how to get those changes approved. Monitoring and reporting methods, keeping track of progress and communicating updates. Project information from previous builds, insights from past projects, like cost, schedule, and performance data, to help guide the current build. Historical information and lessons learned, what you've learned from past builds are what worked, what didn't to make your current project smoother. By getting all these inputs right, you're setting up your project for success, just like ensuring every part of your race car is tuned and ready to win. You gotta pull together all the pieces, follow the rules, and use past experience to build a beast that'll dominate on the track. 5.1.1 Plan Scope Management, Inputs. 5.1.1.1 Project Charter. Project Charter. The project charter is like the initial blueprint for your race car build. It lays out the purpose of your project, gives a high-level description of what you're aiming to achieve, and lists the key requirements, assumptions, and constraints. It's your starting point, giving you the big picture of what you need to do. 5.1.1.2 Project Management Plan. Project Management Plan. This is your detailed game plan for the build, and it includes several key components. Quality Management Plan. This is like your shop's quality control process. It outlines how you're going to manage and ensure the quality of both the project and the final product, influenced by the organization's quality policies and standards. Project Life Cycle Description. Think of this as the stages of your car build, from design and fabrication to testing and racing. It defines all the phases the project will go through from start to finish. Development Approach. This defines how you're going to build your car. Are you using a step-by-step method, waterfall, a more flexible and iterative approach, adaptive or agile, or a mix of both, hybrid? It sets the framework for how you'll tackle the project. 5.1.1.3 Enterprise Environmental Factors. Enterprise environmental factors. These are the external factors that can influence how you manage the scope of your project. They include organization's culture, the vibe and values of your race team or shop. Infrastructure, the facilities, tools, and equipment you have at your disposal. Personnel administration, how you manage your team, their roles, and responsibilities. Marketplace conditions, the current state of the market, including demand and competition. 5.1.1.4 Organizational Process Assets. Organizational process assets. These are the internal resources and guidelines from your shop that help you manage the project scope. They include policies and procedures, the standard operating procedures and policies you follow. Historical information and lessons learned repositories, the knowledge base from past projects, detailing what worked, what didn't, and the lessons you learned along the way. This helps in avoiding past mistakes and repeating successes. By understanding and using these inputs, you're setting up a solid plan to manage the scope of your project, just like you'd carefully plan out each step of building a top-notch race car. It's about making sure you've got all the bases covered so that when it's time to hit the track, your ride is ready to perform at its best. Alright, now, when you talk about collecting requirements for a project, you gotta think about it like this: it's the foundation, the blueprint, the game plan, all rolled into one. See, the project charter, that's your starting point. It lays out the big picture of what we're aiming to achieve and why it matters. Then there's the project management plan. This thing keeps us on track. It spells out how we're gonna handle the scope, manage requirements, and keep everyone in the loop. Scope management, now that's crucial. It's about defining what's in and what's out, so there's no confusion later on. The requirements management plan, well, that's where the magic happens. It tells us how we'll gather, analyze, and document all the nitty-gritty details that make the project tick. Without it, we'd be flying blind. Stakeholder engagement? Now, that's the heartbeat. Knowing who's involved, how they want to be kept in the loop, and what they expect, that's key to getting it right from the get-go. And don't forget those project documents, they're like your playbook. Assumption logs, lessons learned, stakeholder registers, they keep us grounded and learning from past experiences. Business documents and agreements? They give us the rules of the game. They spell out what we need to achieve and what's non-negotiable. Now, when you throw in the enterprise environment factors and organizational process assets, culture, infrastructure, policies, those shape how we gather and use requirements. They set the stage for success. So, collecting requirements ain't just about gathering info. It's about setting the stage right, understanding the playing field, and making sure everyone's on the same page from day one. That's how you build something that stands strong and delivers what it promises. When it comes to defining the scope, think of it like setting the boundaries on the racetrack before we hit the gas. The project charter, that's our starting flag. It lays out what we're aiming for, or what the project's all about, and why we're putting our time and energy into it. Without that, we're just spinning our wheels. Now, the project management plan, it's like our crew chief's playbook. It's got the scope management plan right there, telling us how we're gonna define, validate, and control what's in scope. That's crucial cause it keeps us focused and ensures we're not chasing after every shiny thing that comes our way. Project documents, they're like our tuning logs. Assumption logs, requirement stocks, and the risk register, they give us the intel we need to make smart decisions about what stays in the race. They help us spot the potholes before we hit them and adjust our strategy accordingly. And don't forget about the environment we're racing in, are those enterprise factors and organizational assets. They shape the track we're on, from the culture of our team to the infrastructure we're working with. Knowing these factors helps us navigate the twists and turns of the project without losing our way. So, defining the scope ain't just about drawing lines on a map. It's about setting clear goals, knowing our limits, and making sure we're focused on crossing the finish line strong. That's how we build something that's not just fast, but built to last. When we talk about creating the work breakdown structure, WBS, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty details of how we're gonna tackle this project, step by step. Think of it like planning out each pass down the street, making sure we know how much power the street is going to take before we hit the gas. The project management plan, it's like our crew chief's master plan. Inside, the scope management plan tells us exactly how we're gonna break down the project scope statement into manageable chunks. It's like mapping out the race course so we know where we're headed and how we're gonna get there. Project documents are our blueprints. The project scope statement, requirements documentation, they lay out what needs to be done and why. They're like our checklist, making sure every detail is accounted for before we make our move. Now, the environment we're racing in are those enterprise factors and organizational assets, so they're like the rules of the road. Industry standards, templates for the WBS, and lessons learned from past projects, so they give us the tools and insights to build a WBS that's not just efficient but effective. So, creating the WBS ain't just about dividing up tasks. It's about planning our strategy, knowing the terrain, and setting ourselves up to hit every mark with precision. That's how we ensure every move we make brings us closer to the checkered flag. When it comes to planning out the schedule, you got to approach it like setting up for a race. Every move counts, and timing is everything. Let me break it down for you. The project charter, that's our starting line. It gives us the big picture with key milestones that'll shape how we manage the schedule. It's like knowing where the finish line is so we can plan our route accordingly. Now, the project management plan, it's our crew chief's playbook. Inside, the scope management plan lays out how we're gonna define and develop the scope, which sets the stage for how we'll build our schedule. It's about knowing exactly what needs to be done and when. The development approach is crucial too. It tells us how we're gonna tackle the project to our tools, techniques, and estimating methods. It's like choosing the right gear ratios and tire pressures to maximize performance on the street. Then there's the environment we're working in, are those enterprise factors and organizational assets. They shape our strategy. From team resources and scheduling software to historical data and lessons learned, they give us the insights and tools to plan smart and adjust when needed. So, planning schedule management ain't just about setting dates on a calendar. It's about strategizing, using the right tools, and leveraging past experiences to keep us ahead of the pack. That's how we make sure every move counts and get to the finish line faster and smoother. When we're talking about defining activities, it's like planning out every move on the street to make sure we're racing smart and fast. Let's break it down. First up, the project management plan, it's our crew chief's strategy. Inside, the schedule management plan tells us how we'll organize our time, what method we'll use to plan in waves, and how detailed we need to get with our work. It's like setting up our race strategy, deciding when to push hard and when to ease off. Then there's the scope-based linear, it's like our roadmap. It outlines the project's structure from the WBS to the deliverables, constraints, and assumptions. It's our guide to understanding what needs to be done and how it fits into the bigger picture. Now, the environment we're racing in are those enterprise factors and organizational assets, so they play a big role too. From the culture of our team to the information we get from project management systems and commercial databases, so they give us the tools and insights to plan our activities effectively. And don't forget our organizational process assets, so they're like our toolkit. Lessons learned from past projects, standardized processes, templates, so they help us build our activity list based on what's worked before. It's about leveraging experience to streamline our approach and avoid pitfalls. So, Defining activities ain't just about making a list, it's about setting ourselves up for success, knowing the track ahead, and using the right tools to stay ahead of the competition. That's how we ensure every move we make on the project brings us closer to the checkered flag. Alright, when we're talking about sequencing activities in street racing terms, it's like planning out our race strategy, knowing when to hit the gas and when to pedal it, all to keep us ahead of the competition. Here's how we break it down. First off, we've got our project management plan. It's like our crew chief's playbook. Inside, the schedule management plan tells us how we'll sequence activities. It lays out the method we'll use, the level of detail we need, and other criteria to make sure everything runs smooth and fast. Then there's the scope-based linear. It's our roadmap on the track. It outlines the project's structure from the WBS to the deliverables and constraints. It's crucial cause it helps us understand what needs to happen in what order, just like lining up our races to maximize our performance. Next up, our project documents are there like our tuning logs. The activity list and activity attributors, so they tell us all the moves we gotta make, from start to finish. They also detail any dependencies or constraints that could affect our sequence, just like knowing which cars we can draft behind and which ones we gotta pass. And don't forget about the environment we're racing in. Are those enterprise factors and organizational assets, so they shape our strategy too. From industry standards to our project management tools and systems, they give us the edge to plan our moves smart and quick. So, sequencing activities ain't just about making a list, it's about planning our strategy, knowing the street ahead, and using the right tools to keep us ahead of the pack. That's how we make sure every move we make on the project brings us closer to that finish line. In the world of high-stakes street racing, estimating activity durations is like planning out every move on the street to ensure you hit your marks and come out ahead. Here's how the inputs for estimating activity durations in project management relate to tuning a race car. Project Management Plan, Section 4.2.3.1, Schedule Management Plan, Section 6.1.3.1, just like mapping out the race strategy, this plan sets the method and precision needed to time each step of your project. Scope Baseline, Section 5.4.3.1, similar to understanding the engine's capabilities, this baseline includes technical details that influence how much effort and time each task will require. Project Documents, Section 6.4.1.2, Activity Attributes, Section 6.2.3.2, these are like knowing your car's specifications of predecessors, successors, and relationships between activities that impact how long they'll take. Activity List, Section 6.2.3.1, it's your checklist of every critical task, essential for estimating how much time the entire race era projector will take. Enterprise Environmental Factors, Section 6.4.1.3, Duration Estimating Databases, think of it as your racetrack history. It helps predict how long similar tasks have taken before, guiding your current estimates. Productivity Metrics, like knowing your crew's best lap times, these metrics show how efficiently resources have been used in the past. Organizational Process Assets, Section 6.4.1.4, Historical Duration Information, just as past races inform your strategy, this data helps refine estimates based on what's worked before. Scheduling Methodology, it's your race strategy, how you plan to sequence tasks to maximize efficiency and speed. Each of these inputs is critical. Just like in racing, where knowing your car's capabilities, understanding the street conditions, and learning from past races can make the difference between winning and losing. In project management, accurate estimates ensure you hit deadlines and achieve your goals without spinning out. Developing a schedule in street racing is like mapping out every move before we hit the asphalt. Here's why each of these inputs is crucial. Project Management Plan, this is our game plan. It outlines how we'll schedule races and manage our time. It tells us the tools we use to calculate our timings and what methods keep us on track. Project Documents, Activity Attributes, these are like knowing each racer's strengths and weaknesses. It helps us plan who races when and where. Activity List, lists out all the races we'll compete in, from the big ones to the small challenges. Assumption Log, this is our gut feeling about how each race will go. It predicts risks that could mess with our timing. Basis of Estimates, it's like knowing how fast each car can go and for how long. This helps us estimate how long each race will take. Duration Estimates, predicts how long each race will last based on past experience and conditions. Lessons Learned, what we've learned from past races. It helps us avoid making the same mistakes twice. Milestone List, These are our checkpoints. They mark where we need to be at key points in the season. Project schedule network diagrams, like a map of our racing strategy. It shows which races depend on others and the best order to race them. Project team assignments, tells us who's racing which car and when. Keeps everything organized. Resource calendars, shows when each car and racer are available. Helps us plan our schedule around everyone's availability. Resource requirements, lists what we need for each race, from cars to tools. Helps us prepare everything we need to win. Risk register, predicts what could go wrong during a race and how it could affect our schedule. It's like knowing where the roadblocks might be. Agreements, these are our deals with other racers and suppliers. They tell us what we've promised and when we need to deliver. Enterprise environmental factors, these are the rules of the road. They tell us what standards we have to meet and how we can communicate with other racers. Organizational process assets, this is our playbook. It tells us how to build and update our racing schedule. It's our calendar that keeps track of all our racing events. Each of these elements helps us plan our racing season down to the last second. It's about being prepared, knowing our strengths and weaknesses, and making sure we hit the finish line first, every time.